There's a lot of conversation recently about the acquisition of land at Drax, 50 acres to be precise, for the purpose of low-income and lower middle-income housing by the Minister of Housing. I understand the concerns of many Barbadians who may feel that they have been robbed of the opportunity of having an appropriate settlement for the reparations that ought to be made as a result of the blood, sweat and tears of Barbadians over centuries. I want to make it clear that this is not a matter that we take lightly. Indeed, the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act was enacted and dealt with by successive governments because we recognize the need for the government of Barbados, whoever that government is, to be able to make reparations for people whose ancestors were forced to live in some of the harshest conditions and were deprived of all opportunities to be able to make the best for themselves and their families. So we get the concept of reparations both domestically, but also, as we have been doing, internationally. The reality is that we have been at the forefront of making the call for reparations against those who contributed to the decimation of this country and the lives of people, while at the same time enriching themselves and building out the Industrial Revolution and that which has now become the climate crisis caused by the greenhouse gas emissions coming from the Industrial Revolution. So we get it. But at the same time, I need to remind us, Barbados is a country that is governed by the rule of law. We have never made it a habit, or nor am I aware of any example where we have expropriated people's land when people have land that is a subject of compulsory acquisition. By law, we are due to pay for it. At the same time, that does not preclude us from going aggressively to be able to pursue both through our advocacy and, as we are seeking to do in recent times, through the preparation of what are our legal options with respect to being able to take action not only against the owners of Drax Plantation, but also against all others who have contributed to the condition of this country being, regrettably, one of the worst examples of modern racism in the Americas. We believe that there is a justifiable case for us to continue to mount. We, in fact, met with Mr. Drax some time ago. I am not happy with the pace at which these discussions have continued, but believe you me, we will, as we are required to do, pause and to listen to Bajans to understand what is really at stake here, recognizing that we do not cut off our nose to spite our face. And what do I mean by that? That we should not deny ordinary Barbadians who are in need of housing the opportunity to have housing. But at the same time, that we pursue with greater alacrity the issue of reparations with respect to Mr. Drax and with respect to any others with whom there is a case and a chain of custody that we can justify. The Drax Hall is one of those few ones that we can actually trace the chain of custody back to the 17th century. And to that extent, the government has expressed itself as wanting to be able to find a settlement that would be just for the people of St. George and the people of Barbados. Given the conversation, I believe that it is appropriate for us to pause the acquisition to allow for greater conversation to take place and also for us to be able to see where we are in terms of being able to get some kind of reasonable settlement with Mr. Drax, recognizing that in our conversations, without prejudice to anything else, he is aware that the government of Barbados feels strongly about this and will pursue these matters. I hope that this explains matters to each and every one, recognizing that even though we believe that a wrong has been perpetrated to us, we were always taught as children that two wrongs don't make a right. And those who sought to ignore the law or who sought to make the law and root it in immoral and immoral purposes cannot be our moral compass today as to how we act. Having said that, we will go after all legitimate actions that we can take through advocacy and legal issues to be able to justify our claim for reparations, while at the same time finding ways to meet the day-to-day needs and immediate needs of Bajans who are in need of either housing or who see this as a platform, like through free education, to bring themselves out of poverty. And may I remind those who are singling out Drax Hall alone, as we deal with the issue of housing our people, that all of Barbados was a patchwork of plantation tenantries before. And that is why I made the point that the government earlier would have, through the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, undertaken one of the most aggressive forms of land reform in the Americas. 40 years ago, under Prime Minister Tom Adams, we agreed that Barbadians who lived on tenantries, like the same Drax Hall tenantry, where their houses had been there for more than 5 years in the same family, that they should be able to purchase that land at the equivalent of 10 Barbados cents a square foot or 5 US cents a square foot. And what does this really mean? That even today, 40 years later, that Bajans who live on plantation tenantries will benefit from the subsidy that was required by law to be provided by the plantation owner with respect to the land on which they are living, such that those people could move immediately from having to deal with the improvement of their houses instead of having first to find large sums of money to purchase the land on which the house was sited. And this, as I said, was and is to me one of the most perfect forms of reparations. Regrettably, it was done by the people who themselves were the descendants of slaves. And the fact that it has not yet been matched by those who perpetrated the act of slavery, in spite of the compensation that they received from the British government, £20 million in hard cash and another £27 million with respect to the forced labor of people between 1834 and 1838 in the apprenticeship system, is a matter of grave regret for us. If there are those who want to have this conversation fully, so do we. But let us also agree, as I said earlier, that two wrongs do not make a right. And that which was done in earnest to perpetrate and to perpetuate, rather, the profits of a previous generation cannot now be the inclination for us to expropriate land in breach of the Constitution of Barbados. So we will do what we have to do, but always recognizing that as a country governed by the rule of law, that people have their rights safe in this country and can be justified in feeling confidence that they're dealing with a serious country who does not act arbitrarily and capriciously.